Hi, everybody. I'm Jeremy Gibson-Bond from Michigan State University, and I have my coffee, and we're here. Oh, here we go. There we go. And we're here to have candid conversation with some awesome faculty members from lots of different programs that they're here sponsoring Horizons. I guess just by way of introduction, I actually went to University of Texas in my undergrad. I did some stuff at Carnegie Mellon. And I go by he, him, and I'm super excited to talk to everybody. So I don't want to mispronounce anybody's name. So would you all mind go ahead and introducing yourselves? Let's start with Alan, since I know exactly how to pronounce his name.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Alan Turner, and I'm a senior professional lecturer at DePaul University School of Design, which is part of our College of Computing and Digital Media. That's a mouthful. Yeah, I'm excited to be here and talk about our program and hear what everyone else is doing.
Awesome. Akram?
Okay. So I'm Akram Tagavi Burris, or my students just call me Professor Akram. I am the program director and instructor of computer simulation and gaming at the Candid School of Computer Science at the University of Tulsa.
Awesome. Thank you. Clay?
Hey, I'm Clay Ewing. I'm an associate professor at the University of Miami. I'm also the director of Nerd Lab.
Cool. Your trip going well?
Yeah, I think so. So far, we did the aquarium in Chattanooga today.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Yeah, cool. They're on a very long cross-country trip right now. Ellen?
Hi, everybody. I'm Elin Krastenstein. I'm an assistant professor at UC Santa Cruz, and I belong to the computational media department, and I mainly teach in games and playable media professional master's program.
Cool. Edward, do you want to follow up?
Sure. I'm Eddie Melser. I'm also an assistant professor at UC Santa Cruz in the computational media department. I teach in both the GP games professional master's program. So we'll probably give you more of that flavor than the undergrad one.
Awesome. And Michael?
Thanks. Michael Baker. I'm faculty and chair of Arts and Entertainment Technologies at UT Austin.
And David?
Hi, I'm David Cohen. Hi, David D.S. Cohen. I'm an assistant professor of practice at the University of Texas Arts and Entertainment Technology program, where I'm also an assistant chair. And actually, Michael and I are both game industry veterans. I've worked at companies such as WB Games, National Geographic, Disney, Mattel, all sorts of different places. So very excited to be here.
That's fantastic. Great. So I'm really excited to talk to all of you. Nick Fertino, who is at Long Island University, is on his way. He's stuck in the subway like you tend to be in New York, but he's getting here. And so hopefully he'll be joining us soon as well. For students that are watching, interested people who are watching, I am trying to keep an eye on the Twitch. If any of the rest of y'all want to do that too, to watch the Twitch chat. I'm not as good at that as I am at some other things. But I will be trying to watch that some. The goal here is to kind of speak to the interesting little bits, the interesting aspects of our programs, because there are many things that we all teach. I mean, we all teach programming, we all teach art, we all teach design, right? It's the really interesting little things that I find super cool about our different programs. So I guess speaking along those lines, most of us submit to the Princeton Review rankings, and they have like this super specific formula that they use. And there's a lot of stuff that they miss about our programs. So what's kind of one thing in particular that you think is super cool about your program that's maybe kind of missed by the Princeton Review rankings? And I guess just go ahead and just speak when it makes sense to you. You don't have to all answer the question. I'm just interested in hearing it.
I'll go ahead and add. Which whoever. All right. So with the University of Tulsa, one of the things that we offer that I think is really encouraging for especially incoming students is we have an excellent undergraduate research program. Mm-hmm. So even as early as an incoming freshman, if you want to do research in a specific area, you can do that. And so right now I've got 2 freshmen who are working on a game simulation with a couple of sophomores and juniors all together. And so that's a really great opportunity, especially if you're still kind of testing the waters, if that's really the major that you want to get into. But it gives them sort of a preview of what to expect so they can do it over the summer before, as they go into their freshman year. So that's one of the big highlights, I think, especially for prospective students.
That's really cool. And that's something that I've found across several different universities is the technology that we teach students, the things we teach them how to do is so useful to so many research groups, across the university, which is just, that's awesome that your students are able to do that. Who else? Clay, I think you were starting to answer.
Yeah, let's do it. So I guess our thing is we're not just games, right? In fact, most of our students don't make games. We're fully interactive media. We do a lot of stuff with UX. We have a big data visualization contingent, and really just, all things interactive. And we use game design, at least the game design professors use game design as like a lens to look at treating all things interactive.
That's very cool. Yeah.
We take a similar approach over at DePaul, where we recognize that not everyone coming in to learn some of the game technologies are necessarily coming in to be a big game developer type person. So our game program is actually split across 3 different schools. There's the design portion of the program, which is in the School of Design, and it focuses on just those lenses of decisions you're making to bring people into experiences, and much more experience design driven. The School of Computing hosts our programming section, which is much more about systems development. And then the School of Cinematic Arts hosts our animation and game arts section, which is much more oriented towards people who are coming in to learn modeling, animation, and all those things. And we have an interesting blend between the lot, because it makes our majors much more flexible, because you can choose one portion and then have a minor in the other pieces, or just have small concentrations, and kind of it gives you like the opportunity to kind of double dip in various places. But what's especially nice to me is it lends to really interesting research, and it allows us to grow without any one school having to kind of carry the burden of the technology burden of all the things that we have to pull together. So like we currently have the School of Cinematic Arts is working on the virtual production program, right?
All right.
So that we can, recognizing how many people are using things like Unreal and Unity to do movies and production, like The Mandalorian. So we have an entire we have CineSpace, which is a big, I forget the term for it, shooting room. I'm not a cinema person, whatever. But it's there for like special effects or for making movies. And then within our design section, I host the DePaul Regionals Game Studio, which is our own game studio oriented around showing people what it feels like to be inside of a more professional studio, where they have to make decisions based on a project that's been decided outside of them.
Cool. Very cool.
Cool. Yeah, from UC Santa Cruz side, we have like an undergraduate degree, a couple in games from art or the computational media side, so technical or art. The one cool thing about ours is we actually have this designated professional master's program that has its own building in the heart of Silicon Valley. And so we're in really close proximity to a lot of AAA companies. It's really nice because we get to have a lot of industry folks come in and give guest talks or be judges on like green light pitches and things like that. And so that's been a really nice, fun thing that I don't think people realize just how many people get to come in through that. And similarly, we have a ton of games research faculty, both like on that campus and on the main campus. And so we just do a ton of different like technical game research. If you're looking for interactive narrative, that kind of thing. You don't even realize it, but there's like 5 or like 10 different faculty on that kind of stuff.
Neat. Yeah, very cool.
Follow this great conversation here. So at UT Austin, we have a fairly unique program. We focus on games, but also on the way that game technologies and processes are transforming other industries. So this was mentioned by some other folks as well. So we have a very flexible degree program. We're professionally oriented, which means that we don't have a research mandate per se. We do work with university partners on research and other projects, but we're really focusing on professional opportunities for students. And so we also look at things like immersive media, experience design, themed entertainment, the crossover between sort of social, digital, and physical spaces. So that's kind of where we're organized. And then we also partner with computer science and the Department of Radio, Television, Film on a project we call UT Game Design and Development, which is a partnership across campus between multiple units in which students have multiple options to take different courses. And we do things like cross-listing courses, sharing instructors, team teaching, and those kinds of things.
Cool. Speaking of courses and various courses out there, one of the things I love that we do, and I'm sure everybody is these, we call them 491 classes. It's the one-off class that you teach once to see if there's interest, there's something cool. We've done like esports broadcasting and really specific into like character modeling with ZBrush and things like that. What are some one-off classes that y'all have done that have been really interesting and worked out well at your program? And it's okay if they're not one-off anymore, if they've turned into a consistent thing.
Well, we do something similar. What is it's a topics class actually, and so we use it actually as a way to kind of start off bigger projects to see if there's a student interest. So a lot of our VR classes began as topics classes, and now we have an entire VR program that's building up. Again, the virtual production stuff, all those things have been topics classes. The DePaul Originals Game Studio started off as one of these. So I was basically running a class where I was just bringing kids in saying, hey, here's a project. And when you come in, you're basically applying for a seat on the project. And then with the focus on getting people to a point where they develop mastery in a particular piece of their discipline, as opposed to trying to do everything, right? And then that proved to be such it had such great results that we just kept expanding on it and making it into something bigger. And now it's something where now it gives us all these new opportunities where I have the very polished thing that we're trying to work on, but everything that comes with polished things also go towards community classes for community effort. So I'm doing game-like learning with teachers. I'm working with kids who are in juvenile detention and taking these chunks that are being made in this polished space and saying, here, we're going to take a class. You're interested, come in and participate and do this as a service.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great way to go with it. Akram?
Yeah, so at the University of Tulsa, we had a special topics course called Exploration and Gaming Technologies, and it became so popular that it's now on the record. But the idea behind this course is like every 4 weeks, they would research sort of a new technology that's not sort of widespread, whether it be a new control system, or I know that they did like voice activated controls. They did a heartbeat monitor applied to games and things like that they normally wouldn't use in a regular setting, but they would do basically a prototype of a game using these technologies or these new tools, and then kind of write up a report about its feasibility. Would it work? Is it something that needs more research and development before it can go mainstream, or do you think it's ready to go mainstream? And so they had the opportunity to kind of go through it, and we actually have it now as a course that can be repeated for credit because the projects that they do in it are so different, and the technologies that they choose to use can be very different from the first semester to the second time that they take it.
That's very cool too. Nice.
I'll jump in here. So since our program is our program's unique, it sounds like we all have kind of unique programs where we teach a lot of different things, but one of the things is we have traditional game development classes. We have traditional classes in different types of immersive media. But one of the things that we want to kind of communicate best to the students is different ways these things can work in the industry and kind of with a forward-looking place. So we had a class on cosplay, but it was focused on wearable technology. So it was bridging the gap between human to computer technology and how we interact with things. We have a course in storytelling with mini golf. So how can you create an immersive narrative experience through mini golf. We have things like an immersive pop-up where how do you do a pop-up where you can do something very temporary, but create an immersive, interactive experience that can have both physical, dealing with space, and dealing with digital components to it. So I know a lot of these things don't sound specific to games, but believe it or not, game design and game development is very involved with a lot of these different types of technology. And that's why a lot of industries outside of games are looking for game designers, game developers, UI, UX, Clay mentioned user experience design and things like that. And so that's what a lot of these one-off courses focus on, so we can kind of see, try to teach different types of things and create different types of new opportunities for our students.
Yeah, at Santa Cruz, we have a bunch of different kind of specialty classes. One that I've done that I particularly love is a Foundations of Alternative Controller Games class. So, if you want to learn how to hack the Arduino, do crazy things, I've made games like where you take all the stuffing out of a dog, stuffed dog toy, you put all these sensors in it, and then you play Bop It style, like CPR on it. And so I've gotten to show these at festivals, and the whole kind of goal of that sort of class is really to help you build your own festival games and do that kind of portfolio. And so it's very applied, hands-on, how do we program the Arduino? What are the different sensors? How can we learn to pick up our own? That kind of stuff. And then, people are hacking their vacuum cleaners or punching bags, and all sorts of really kind of crazy, fun game interfaces come out of it. So that's been a really fun one-off class that's, I think, going to be a regular in years to come.
Cool. All right, so Nick, not to put you on, I'm putting you on the spot right now. So, hey, man.
Hey, how's it going?
So we were just talking about what kind of interesting topics class or one-off classes have you taught in your program? Do you have anything to throw into there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm relatively new at LIU Post. I just started this semester, so we're still getting this stuff ramped up, but we're already looking into collaborative initiatives across the university. In particular, we're specifically looking at integrations of games and theater as a first enterprise, because there's a really robust theater department and well-known theater department at Post, and they have a lot of interest in immersive work, which I have a background in. We've also been just starting some collaborations with the computer science department about the use of AI in games. And so one of the endeavors that I was brought to LIU Post to initiate, and that we're bringing undergraduates into at the junior and senior level, are these cross disciplinary collaborations and courses that allow them to intersect with different types of arts, and really thinking about games instrumentally, looking at ways that games can be used in other contexts than purely entertainment, or in entertainment forms that aren't game specific.
Cool, thank you. Yeah. And did anybody else want to hit that question before we?
I'll just throw in an interesting backstory. And we do a lot of special topics courses, and because Nick's on this chat, I think it's kind of funny. When I first came to the University of Miami, it was like, what are you going to teach? And it was like, oh, we'll give you a special topics. And they knew that I basically did games and interactive media. So there was special topics, games and interactive media, which was literally the course that I taught at Parsons when I was adjuncting there after I graduated. And that was a course that Nick developed. So it was this full circle thing. So I thought that's cool.
I have never in my life gotten you're going to come in, you'll just teach an easy class for one semester. It's every single time. It's here's your 3-class course load and go. Yeah, every first semester, every time. Cool. Wow. So let's see. Nick, you haven't got a chance to give an actual introduction of yourself. So.
Hi. Okay. I'm Nick Fertino. I've been a game designer for a long time. I know a lot of the people in this call for a long time. I've been I run my own company, and I've been involved in the creation of a lot of original commercial and serious games, and also helped co-found the Come Out and Play Festival, which is the 16-year-old and kind of original street game festival of games you play in public. I am the program director of the game design, digital game design program at LIU Post, which is an undergraduate program that basically is focusing on kind of 3 main principles, like an introduction to the art of game design as, kind of seen from a formalist lens, really what is the practice of system design and how do we use system design to make art, grounding in pure programming technical skill so that students can create their own work and they can at least get to a prototyping, if not a full development path on their own. And then finally, what I was just talking about, these sort of collective collaborations, like sort of working in teams with non-game designers to build different kinds of properties. And what we're really trying to build out in the coming years are those relationships and really create students who are used to not just working on games, but working on games in teams with non-game designers. And so they're fluent in that kind of flow. Cool,
thank you. So a question that I hope will be appreciated by some of the students we have out here. So what's like a specific trait that you think can really help a student be successful in your program that, again, might not be like the thing that they would expect you to say as the answer?
You need to look at your work from more than just from the audience perspective. You need to think about your audience. You need to consider your audience. But when a lot of people, when they're making games, students come in, and most of their experience with games is the games that they've played. So what they're trying to do is trying to mimic those kind of games and not really get an understanding of what the user experience is or what the user wants or what the user really needs, because what we think we want and what we actually need are two different things. So a lot of times students will jump in and they'll try to make another first-person shooter like Halo without really thinking about the mechanics and the dynamics that build up to create those aesthetic experiences. So kind of not taking an existing game and deconstructing it, but taking it from another perspective and finding things and opportunities of gameplay that they can do through experimenting with different things, and then building those up to engaging experiences and putting them in front of an audience to get that feedback. I think that and working in a team collaborative environment are kind of the biggest things. A lot of people go in and talk about, oh, I want to make my own indie games, right? And I want to go out and put my own indie games out there, start my own studio and things like that. Well, the best way of doing that and the best way of learning is to go work for another studio. And in order to work in another studio, you need to be able to collaborate and work with other people. And you're not going to make that great indie game unless you can get other people to buy into your vision. So, and be able to collaborate and give them equal amounts of say and investment in the project. So I know I talked about a bunch of stuff there, but I think there's quite a bit that students come in just knowing from an audience perspective, but not from a designer or developer perspective.
Yeah, and one of the things that you're all missing if you're watching this on Twitch that we're all seeing because we're in the Zoom call is lots of heads nodding around with us all agreeing with each other here as well. So cool. Who else wants to take a stab at that? Alan, I think.
I'll go for it. Who's that?
Go for it, Alan. I'm sorry.
Okay. I was just going to add, I'm trying to think of the right words for this, and investigative, playful curiosity, I guess is what I would call it. I think it's my experience that when students are first coming in, like David was saying, so many of them are primarily still in a very consumer mindset, or they're curators of tropes and play tropes, right? They know what they have done, and so they're ready to replicate that, and so that bleeds their development. And I would much prefer it if people could get into a mindset of, I don't know what I want. I think I know where I'm trying to get. And being willing to craft structures and deconstruct those structures on a regular basis until they get to that place that's like the aha moment. And so, but without thinking they already have the aha when they start. They're waiting for the aha to come. So it's kind of like being the rogue in the team, right? And you're picking the lock and you're listening to the tumblers, and like that's the thing. And it takes a long time for many students to get to that point, and it always breaks my heart that I find that a lot of the time when kids get there, they're ready to graduate. They're like, oh, we're ready to do the stuff.
Right.
And but yeah, that if you can cultivate that quality about yourself, I think that helps you develop this great adaptability that will allow you to flow into whatever variation or cascades place of game design that speaks to you, that's nourishing to you.
Yeah, and really closely tied to that is this idea of sunk cost, of like, it doesn't matter how much time you put into it. If it's bad, throw it out. That is so hard to get across to students, and it's so critical, I think. Yeah. Elaine.
So this is one of those basic things that people tend to forget, because we tend to focus a lot on making them being curious about things, knowing when to stop, knowing when to continue. But communication skills. being good at communication, being good at communicating with your team, or if you're not good at communicating with your team or with other people in the program, learning how to be and reflecting on how you can do better. Because oftentimes you come in and you're just so excited, you want to make your game, you want to make your stuff, you have your own agenda, and then you forget that every single one in of the students in the room also has their own agenda. And this sort of learning how to negotiate, learning how to reflect on if something goes wrong, it's not the end of the world. It just means that you need to adjust or you need to take something away from it so you can do better next time. So for me, and I think for our program in particular, we place a very, very heavy emphasis on learning how to be a part of a team, learning how to work well together, and learning how to deal with problems as they arise. And that is one of the key things I think that enables our students to be successful in the industry, more so than almost anything else.
That's so critical. And when I was in grad school at Carnegie Mellon, one of our required courses our first semester was improv acting. And that is literally just like, don't be a jerk in a meeting, the class, you know, and it was wonderful. It really helped.
Yeah. I would say to piggyback on that too, being able to communicate like your ideas through prototypes. Like, I don't know how many students I've had that just like sink themselves into like programming, and it's like, stop, just put it on paper. Can you express it through paper? Because that's a lot faster.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Nick, you had something as well?
Yeah, and I just want to take the flip side of all of this, because I think it's equally important, is the ability to be critical, right? And the ability to be critical while being able to communicate and while being curious. Because I think one of the things that you learn as a game designer when you're in the field is that like we just beat each other's work up all the time, but we don't do it from a hostile perspective. We do it from like a desire for everything to improve. And that like what you can do in a game design degree that's really nice is be in a community of people who can all critique each other all the time. And there's a kind of magic to that when that community is really strong, because it's a loving community that only wants everyone to get better, and it doesn't compromise on that, right? And to the point that you made, Jeremy, about like, you know, if it's a bad design, you throw it out. You learn to do that for yourself, and you learn to do that to help other people do that. And when that conversation works really well, partnered with the communication we were just talking about, because you can do that obviously very badly, but if you do it well, then you get like a cohort. That's like the term that we use in these college contexts. You get a cohort that grows together as artists, and there's a magic to that that's like unlike anything I've ever seen.
And it boosts everybody's work so well. I mean, like I think our art within our program, they're very critical of each other in a really positive way. And man, the quality's just gone up so much over the last several years. Yeah. Cool. Did anybody else want to throw in on that question? Okay, cool. I gotta pull up another one now. So let's just look at the future for a little bit. What do you think you might be teaching in 5 years that you're not teaching now?
I'm going to jump in on this one. Yeah, this is great. So this is, I tell folks all the time, like, this is the thing that keeps me up at night. So when I think about the program and think about the structure of like an undergraduate experience, and, you know, the 4 or so years the students kind of go through, right? They come in, right, in year 1, and they go through 4 years or so, and then they get squished out the other end. And then the world is different, right? Like things have changed, like business models are new, and we understand the, you know, the art form better and that kind of thing. So I put a lot of energy into worrying about this, but also thinking about and trying to look at the landscape, you know, out in front of us. So I'm really, you know, interested in the way that, you know, some of the machine learning and AI research is transforming creative practice. The idea of these sort of intelligent creative assistants, right, that can kind of work alongside humans to tackle creative problems, whether it's, you know, system related, or if it's a visual design problem, or even something in the narrative space. To me, that's something that's fascinating, and I'm kind of watching that horizon very closely. And so I imagine that in the next, you know, 5 years or so, or probably before then, we are going to have to start teaching, you know, some courses and engaging students in working, or at least thinking about, you know, how practice will transform, you know, through using some of these kind of upcoming, very near future kind of, you know, creative machine hybrid systems.
Absolutely. We've been looking just a little bit at teaching Houdini for that from an art perspective in terms of how do you generate sort of procedural art, but just expanding that is amazing. What are some other things that y'all are thinking about teaching at some other schools? Akram?
Oh, so one of the things that I've been, ever since a kid is I've been wanting to experience the holodeck. And so I can see that becoming more of a reality with the volume and digital production, real-time production, and then with the VR technology, along with AI and having those real-time conversations and interactions. And that's my dream, is to help develop or help prepare students to develop that type of interaction at that level. And I think that's something that's becoming more and more of a possibility as we move into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. We would love to build one of those. Edward, Eddie, did you have something? Sorry.
Yeah, one that I think like we kind of are starting to address, like with the alt control class and things, but definitely needs a lot more explicit classes, and I think we'll be seeing a lot of in the next few years, is VR and AR, and like really teaching classes for like XR in general. For commercial games, for one, because we've seen kind of the rise of that popularity. But I think really in the serious game space is where that's becoming huge, right? Like training, simulation, rehabilitation, like all these types of applications of VR in like the physical, like in like these domains like health and education that we just like people don't know how to design for yet. And it's actually a really hard design challenge. I talk about this a lot in like my alt control class. But whenever you're designing games that suddenly the body becomes part of the controller or the element of the game, you now have two sets of affordances designed for. You've got your digital and your physical, and it makes everything a much more complicated nightmare. I find it a much more fun challenge, actually, but it's a lot more to think about and work with. And so that's definitely something that I think in the next few years, even there's going to be quite a few classes in that kind of that topic area.
Yeah, yeah. Eileen?
So one thing sort of related to that is accessibility, which has been growing a lot lately, and there's growing awareness and there's growing interest in that space. And also just because if you design an accessible game, you're often just designing a good game in general. So I think accessibility is also going to be one of those things that we're going to have dedicated classes to, and really focus on how to improve accessibility in design and sort of incorporate that more broadly into our courses. We already have one course on accessible games in our undergraduate program, but I would really like to see more of them, and just accessibility more broadly incorporated across the board.
Alan, sir?
Over the years, I've grown more and more fond of play more so than games, and just thinking about world building and mindful world building, and how we use world building in our games and play spaces as ways to create accessibility, inclusivity, and just thinking about classes that can be taught that's on one level that are about actually constructing worlds, right, that people will inhabit, but also recognizing how much bleed there is from our game spaces into our everyday spaces, and thinking about ways to talk about the kind of world building that we're doing in our day-to-day existences. And so leaning into places where there are communities, and how do you take what's really strong about games and play and bring it into the communities that you're engaging with and that you're trying to construct, so that there's investment from everyone there, and people feel included, and everything is empowering.
That's I'm sorry, Clay. I told you to go next, but that we constantly think about the world building of the environment of our program, of trying to make our program work for everybody. And man, that was so much more challenging during COVID. It changed the game so much in terms of what worked and what didn't work. But yeah, I think about that constantly. That's what keeps me up at night, Michael, is our community. So yeah, I'm sorry, Clay, go ahead now.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, honestly, I think it's ethics. Because I think COVID made it real, like screen time, like just like this, like, whoa, like that's a really big issue. And when we look at like the internet, just in general, and internet applications, and they really follow a lot of things that come from games with engagement design. And when you think about like freemium games and upselling people and being on the screen all the time, like the idea of making a free game that just like gets a lot of eyeballs and like you profit by making addictive stuff, you got to talk about ethics, right?
Yeah. In looking at Indie Exchange coming up in August, we're talking about a panel on getting beyond manipulative game design, which I'm really interested to see that. Nick, you had something.
Yeah, I think kind of in a similar vein of like, what have we learned from COVID? I think that there was a migration of all of these art forms into digital spaces, and all of a sudden they all became interactive, and all of a sudden they're all starting to stumble into interactivity in all these different ways. And I think that if I look ahead 5 years, you know, like when the Royal Shakespeare Company and the National Opera in the UK basically say everything they do from now on is going to be hybrid, and the Geffen has a magic performance online that makes over $100,000 in a single show, there's a drive towards like bringing interactive design into all of these spaces that are going to be like really reimagining what those spaces are. And so I think that in addition to the sort of like gamification stuff we've seen in the past, there's going to be a desire for game design in other fields and interaction design with a gameful, playful eye. And so I think that like what I'm most interested in sort of building and changing over time is not just those specific forms and sort of thinking about how they develop, but like continuing to cultivate a transforming understanding of storytelling and interaction design and playfulness as more and more media start to realize that like probably you should have a game designer on this project. Like probably your immersive show should have a game designer. Probably your web project should have a game designer. Probably your marketing campaign should have a game designer.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So we actually got I shouldn't sound surprised by this. We got a great question from Twitch that I'd love for y'all to give your thoughts on. So the question is, university game projects can suffer from both the short time frame of a single semester and the inexperience of the student developers. What development aspects should students be focusing on to get the most value from their university projects?
I'll go ahead and start, because
Please.
I have this problem every year. And I think one of the other sessions that came up earlier, they were talking about feature creep. And so when students start a project, they're like, oh, I want this in it. I want this in it. And one of the things we try to focus on is like, get one feature working and then move on from there. Just focus on what is it that you really want to do. And then of course, when we have our larger scale projects, like our senior projects, which are all group-based projects, we try to break it out. You know, one person works on the player AI, and then one person works on the control system, and so forth, so that they can each have their own little feature and get that component working, and then see if it works with the larger group and stuff. So again, I think try to keep the game as simple as possible. And another thing that I always emphasize with my students is, if you know you're going to be working on a game project, use all your college courses for that project. If you have a creative writing class, write the story for the game. You know, if you have an art course, develop the artwork for the game. You know, just make it so that all the work that you do in your other courses, if it's possible, can end up being in that one game project.
Though, make sure you tell both professors of both classes beforehand, because we've run into an issue with that before where it was a surprise sometimes. No, but that's super important. Like I always try and push this idea of like the core, make sure the core mechanic of your game is, or your core experience is fun. And then I also talk a lot about the hook, like what's going to get somebody interested in it? What's going to get them to be like, oh, I should check that out, as opposed to the 100,000 other things I could be doing. Yeah, cool. What are some other thoughts on this? David, you got your hand up?
Yeah, because this is a big one for me. So, and it's based on both what you both have said here. So learn to understand, which is one of the hardest things for students, and to love and appreciate the core loop. The core loop issue is the center of your game that everything is built around. It's that one system, not even a system. It's the one thing that people like to do over and over and over again. Build that, make it beautiful, make it perfect, and then expand from there, because everything else is icing. You can cut things out and the audience will never know that it was never intended to be, that you intended it to be there, and it's gone. So I think as far as scoping, that's critical. Understand, get a really good, fun toy to build your game around, and then expand from there. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is like learn to work with limitations. When you're out in the real game development industry and you are a professional game designer, you can't design everything you want. You have to actually work within the limitations of what has already been identified by the team. You can't stay up all night building a whole system that you've chosen to create and then tell a team of 120 other people, oh, this is what we're doing now. You have to learn to work within those limitations, and you have to learn how to innovate within those limitations. Super Mario Brothers is just run, jump, and bounce, or bash. But look at all the amazing gameplay opportunities that have been created from that. And there's probably been others that we just never knew about that they wanted to do. But as the audience, we wouldn't know what's in the head of the designer. We just know what we're getting at the end. And that's what is the most polished and sharp thing. So, and those of like old school games were built in a very, very short period of time. And it's very, very possible to build a hugely engaging, smaller game within a semester and within a team, as long as you focus in on the core gameplay, the core loop, and as long as you're focusing on working within limitations and not trying to break outside of that. And innovation is great, but innovate with restrictions. That's all I'm saying.
Right, and the corollary to that limitations thing is understand the implications, the implications of the decisions you're making. Right, and if you don't understand what it's going to mean to programming or to art to make a decision, talk to them about it. Like, that's the reason there's a lead artist or programmer on the team, is to tell you that that's another 1,000 hours. We can't do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Alan, yeah.
So I just want to add to that, and for me, it's always communicated in this idea of get in the habit of building interesting, elegant toys, right? If you can do that just off of a single mechanic, like David was saying, over time as a creator, and especially if you're doing this stuff in your off time in between classes, because we only have like 10-week quarters, so there's not a whole lot. You can't make a build game and a big game in that time. But if you're making good use of the time in between your quarters or semesters or what have you, and you're building all these interesting what if moments, which is just a single elegant interaction that's just really fun and playful to do, by the time you're done, you will have a toolbox of stuff you can just deploy into whatever game ideas that you're building. You already know how to do it. You have mastery over that particular implementation, and so you don't have to always be building from the ground up every time. So by the time you're ready, you're getting close to your tenure at school, you'll be able to just jump right into projects and ideas, as opposed to kind of doing all this hair pulling that we do at the beginning of a project.
Yeah, Eddie, go for it.
Okay, yeah, so I'll just kind of tack on to all of these. There's like such a fundamental one, which is planning. I tell people so many times in my classes, when you look at like movies and things like that, like they spend 5 times more on pre-production than they do in their production phase. And games like that tend to be really successful also do that. I'm not saying like do a ton of planning and like, paralyze yourself, but even just starting to think through, like really plan out, what is my core mechanic? What is that actually going to take to make? Like, what assets am I going to need? We've seen like that, teams that are really successful in solo groups, they use a spreadsheet and they plan out, just that simple, like we need this just to get our 2-week prototype done. That level of planning will really get you really far in these short type of prototype phases. So that's a big one. Skill is just don't jump into it immediately. I've done that myself. I've seen so many people do it, and then you hit a wall. It helps you to really think through your design if you plan it a little bit first.
Absolutely. Something we've been moving towards. We have a 4-semester minor cohort thing. The middle 2 classes I teach, and the first one has turned into just pre-production. You do pre-production with randomized teams on 3 or 4 projects, and then pitch the one you want to go forward to a full semester of actual production the next time. And we found Richard Lamarchand's game design macro that he talked about in Melbourne at the game festival out there is a really good tool to help with that as well. Yeah, awesome. Right. Yeah, I spend way too much time in spreadsheets, but I love it. I love it. So what do you think? We're running short on time, and I hope this is a good question. So if y'all think it's terrible, we can just skip it. But say someone wants to apply to your program. It's a student, they want to apply to your program, and the application's due in 1 month. What could they do in that 1 month that would like really impress you? And within the realm of possibility, but like something that could be really cool, that really help get them a leg up in terms of the application for your program.
I would say pitch a really interesting concept.
Cool.
That's it.
I can piggyback on that. So we actually have chosen an admissions strategy, which is intended to be as equitable as possible. So we actually don't use a portfolio gate of any kind for incoming students. We work really closely with central admissions and college admissions. And so we provide them with a statement about kind of what types of students would do well on the program. And then on top of that, for transfer students, we do have a kind of a creative prompt. And what we ask for there is for students to describe a way in which they would transform something using creative technologies. And so what we're looking for there is some evidence that even if they don't have access like to those tools, or maybe they don't have the skills yet, right? If they're sort of dreaming and thinking about, you know, ways that creative technologies and processes can transform something into something else, that for us is kind of the sweet spot. That's an optimal kind of student, you know, view coming into the program, because that means they're going to be open to all the things that we're teaching, and they really have this sort of goal, you know, that they're looking at out in the future. They're not hung up necessarily in like software or technical things, right? Or specific games or other experiences. They're kind of looking forward.
Yeah, Helen, please.
So similar to what Michael was saying, we don't have any kind of gatekeeping of that nature in our program, because we have this whole Vincentian ideal, which is everyone gets an opportunity to elevate themselves, and so we'll take you with next to no knowledge. But once you're in, once you've applied and you've gotten into the school, I highly recommend reaching out and finding out about the individual professors who are teaching things, and find a professor you connect to and begin conversation, so they get a better understanding of what it is you're trying to do, and they can help steer you to make the best use of your innate abilities and your particular curiosities, so that you can actually start making stuff that motivates you, and you don't feel like you're going through the drudgery of just taking classes. Nothing drives me crazy more than kids who are in the space of like they're just trying to get through a class. And I don't even care if you fail, but if you walk out of there knowing why you failed and how you did things, again, it was game feedback, right? Then I feel like there's a greater chance for you to succeed.
Yeah, Elaine?
So if you would only have a week, for us, we really like to see how you break down projects. So if you have a project that you're already working on and you maybe iterated on it once, or you're planning to iterate on it, we really like seeing how you would break it down, how you reflect on the design, and what you would do to change it. And particularly in sort of in relation to what we've been talking about already, the core loop, what is the player doing? And showing that you are aware of how you would thoughtfully build on what you already have, or how you would change it because it wasn't working. One way of doing this would be to show us a playtest or playtest breakdown, level design breakdown, and then a little report or something that you would put together to show us how you were thinking. Because everybody can have an idea, everybody can build a prototype, but a good designer reflects on what they've been doing and thoughtfully thinks about, how am I breaking this apart so I can put it together or iterate on it or improve it in some manner. And that is what we're really looking for our students, is that they have that awareness. So if you only have a week, that would be what I would recommend.
Yeah, cool. While other folks are
can I just,
yeah, go for it,
I'm just
David,
going to
go
throw
for it.
this
Yeah,
out there. If you're interested in making games, you should be making games. Month before you apply, year before you apply, always making games. So join a game jam. If you've never opened up Unity or something like that before, find out how you can help with the team, find out all the different things, because game jams are a wonderful way of working as part of a community, working as part of a team, and actually jump in a weekend, you have a game. It might not be a great game. It might be a first pass, but it's something. And the more you do that, I like when my students tell me they were up late playing video games, I like tell them, no, you should have been up late making video games. Don't just make the stuff that you're making in your class. You should always be making games. Just like when you see a great artist or if you ever work at a game studio, you see a great artist, they're in at meetings, they're constantly drawing. They're taking their notes as drawings, right? It's because they're always drawing. So a game designer, game developer, game coder, anybody, they should always be making games.
There's a couple of super good points there. The first one is, like, every jam game I've ever worked on, I remember and I think back on fondly, even though it was just a terribly spent weekend that had a disaster at the end that kind of worked. I love it, and I loved being part of that process. And then the other one is, like you're saying with the drawing, just do the work. Our students that are most successful are the ones who just do the work. Like, if you want to get to be a great artist, draw. If you want to get to be a great programmer, program. If you want to be a great designer, design. Just do the work. There's no shortcut. Yeah. Akram? Yeah.
So just to add on, so our program doesn't have any kind of entry gatekeeping as well. But one of the things that we started about 10 years ago now is the Computer Simulation and Gaming Conference that our university hosts. And it's a part conference, part competition. So we have a competition open to, it's technically open to K through 12, but mostly we get middle school and high school students to participate in it. And it's a great way for us to find those students who we're like, oh, you should really look into these types of programs and stuff like that. And also we've also incorporated a competition for college students, and it's open, internationally, technically, for students to participate. And it's a great way for our students to get to see some of the games that other students have made around the state, around the region. We had several people this past April who participated all the way from North Carolina to Oklahoma to Arkansas. And so it's just a great way to get that inspiration, kind of the same with the game jams, and to get an idea of what type of games you want to make, and to show that you can make games and that you're willing to put in the effort for it.
Cool. Very, very cool. Man, this has been such an amazing conversation, y'all. I really hope it's recorded, because I'm sure I'm not remembering 100% of it, and I want to. This was wonderful talking with all of you. So we're getting the red light of time to stop soon. Does everyone just give a quick, wrap up, last kind of statement kind of thing?
I want to say something, actually.
Yes, sir.
And this is in relation to the conversation we're having about core loop, because I think we spend a lot of time talking about core loops. But something I think that students really need to learn how to do is that polish that comes after the core loop and the feedback stuff, right? Spending time, thinking of everything as a narrative, and being able to communicate what happens before, during, and after every event in your game. So if you're doing very small games, this becomes really easy. And if you're thinking of yourself as a game designer, get in the habit of storyboarding all those little moments. Storyboard them, hand them over to your artists, hand them over to your programmers, and then have the conversations to talk about how those things break down. If you get in the habit of thinking of everything in your game as part of the narrative and not just story, you can go so much further, and it becomes so much easier to break everything in the world around you down into moments of play and interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick?
The last bit of advice I would give to potential students, particularly as undergraduates, is we talk a lot about your ability to develop, but it's also your ability to critique. It's also your ability to work with people. It's also your ability to have an identity as an artist. And so as much as you're thinking about the things that you're making, you should also think a lot about what kind of identity do you want to form in college? And what does that mean that you're a designer or an artist or a developer? And how do you put yourself out into the world with that story, the story of the person that you're becoming, in the most effective way? And just keep that in mind as you're going through your program. Your portfolio isn't just a collection of your work. The portfolio is the story of who you've become as a result of that work. And think of your portfolio as not just a catalog, but as a narrative of what you are and how you think and what you like and don't like and what you want to do.
Cool. David?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave with a little bit of advice. This is advice to all potential students out there, people who are looking at going to college programs. Don't go to college to learn how to press a button or to learn a software program. You can do that far better on YouTube and all of these different tutorial websites than you could ever learn in a college classroom. What you're going to college for is to learn the skills. So, and you're learning how to, a lot of us who, there are a lot of folks here from the industry here, and we've learned, a lot of us have learned through failing on multi-million-dollar projects and things like that, right? So college is a great safe space to learn through failure. And you learn more through failure than you do through your successes. But when you go on your resume and you're writing down the skills that you have, you're not supposed to, don't write software. Write what you can do with that software, and write how you can innovate, how you can think about things, how you can reflect on things, what you can actually do, because that's what we're teaching you here. It's kind of, think of going to college as an accelerator program of life experience and design experience and all of those different things. But don't ever go into school just thinking, I'm going to learn that there's one right way and one wrong way of doing things, or one button to press, because there's so much more to it than just that.
And to both Alan and Nick's points, like, your resume and your cover letter are also narratives that you're telling about yourself, that you're priming people to ask you the questions you want to answer. Don't just waste it on a list of skills. Like, that's ridiculous. Yeah. Anybody else with a final, I know Dom's telling me we got to hurry up. Anybody else with a final quick statement? All right, so I'll throw one in here. What I always tell my students, you are always interviewing. You are always interviewing. And what that means is the people that you're working with in your classes, the people that you meet at conferences, every one of those people is someone you're going to run into later, or could run into later, that could help you get a job or keep you from getting a job if they think you're going to hurt the company. So always just be cool to each other, be excellent to each other. And thank you so much, everybody, for this conversation. I really love being part of this. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was awesome.
All right, take care,
everyone.
And we're off air. We did it.